Welcome back. I hope you all are doing fantastic, and let us return to our studies of the book, The Strategic Lessons Unlearned from Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. I wanted to take a moment and chat about the release from the Pope on the 1st at about 8:30 in the morning. He released a quote from an interview stating, "It is necessary to put an end to the irresponsible policy of intervening from the outside, building democracy in other countries, ignoring the traditions of people." And this may support the larger worldview that this author seems to be taking, meaning that military and the military leaders are so in their military lane, and it's a hard lane to be in. It's not that they're silly or we're trying to paint a poor picture of these people. It's just that the military war machine is meant to do military, and perhaps like any professional that gets so far down into the details and begins to specialize so much in a particular area that they may become increasingly irrelevant or detached from the greater worldview. Because remember, the author stated, all three wars were lost before the first shots were fired, not on the battlefield, but at the strategic level of war. The United States interpreted all three conflicts as insurgencies, when in fact all three were civil wars in which the United States took a side. Success was never possible from the outset. He states, because none of these countries were nations for which the majority of their citizens were willing to fight and die. That nation building is a slow evolutionary process. It's an internal process through which the political identity of the people within the country's borders matures over centuries to go beyond or transcend tribalism, secularism, and ethnic divides. And that this takes so much time because it's eventually going to lead to reaching a pervasive nationhood. Going on that foreigners can build architecture, but they cannot build a nation. Extensive empirical data shows conclusively that there was no increase in local community support for the Afghan government. For example, after the delivery of schools, roads, clinics, and so on by the counterinsurgents, we built it and they did not come. Furthermore, this data was available before the tactic of clear, hold, and build was widely implemented at an enormous cost in blood and treasure or money. All that aside, the immediate thing that came to my mind was all of the good that was done in those couple of decades, especially looking at the schools that were built, the kids, especially girls and women that were able to receive education. And Angela Merkel states that. She said, "I must say, in our development cooperation efforts, we did not want to force any system on Afghanistan, but we saw millions of girls who were glad to go to school and the women could participate." But again, this gets into the conversation that instead of so much money, assets, and resources dedicated towards war assets, that we maybe could have partnered in different ways to help. But again, that's all speculative and goes beyond the bounds or purview of our conversation. I just wanted to highlight that this theme that we're talking about is more pervasive than we think, that we get so much into our Americanism, our American culture, our American society, and the way that we do things, that we forget that there are other worldviews from other communities. And there seems to be an underlying consistency in their stance about what has been going on. Even, again, just to review one more thing, the intent of this book is to break the ice of conventional thinking, which has calcified or solidified the discussion of these issues into such predictable patterns, and to demonstrate that the outcomes of Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan were in fact predetermined by immutable political and cultural imperatives before the first shots were fired. This book will show that these tragedies were avoidable. That again, maybe all of this, whether these things we're talking about are factual or not, or right or wrong, that at least it may be able to take these fixed ideas and what seem to be truths, because they're so fixed or so calcified, and shatter them and break them, so we can look at the pieces and reformulate our truth. Maybe, of course, as a nation, but as individuals, because these things are very shocking and awing, and it's tough. It's tough as an Afghanistan veteran to see these things, and it just reiterates and drives home the truth that we need to be informed, but we need to be participating mentally in reflection and tearing these things apart and figuring them out for ourselves, figuring out our own truths, and not just running along casually and taking the templated truths from these different agencies or people and taking them as our own. We need to be very deliberately crafting and creating our own version of truth for very specific reasons. and not just running along with the automatic program of whatever the most popular or whatever the most emotionally stimulating or seemingly right answer is. So think about it, reflect, and again, taking it all together, reflect on it as a whole, and what types of thoughts and emotions does it stimulate, and what virtues are those connected to, because those pieces of the puzzle are more of the root type pieces of the puzzle that are going to help us forge meaning for ourselves and stay more centralized, more centered, more our military bearing in this hurricane, in the winds of all this turmoil.